right, guys. So let me share my screen with you. And let's take a look at the vertebral column, thoracic cage. Thoracic cage, I have part of it here. Obviously, this is on the articulated models. So I don't have some of the aspects of it here. Let me go down here to sternum. Okay. So here we have the sternum. I have the three parts of it. I have the manubrium, the body, and then the little part down here that dangles is the xiphoid process. And that's what you'd obviously try to avoid if you want to do chest compressions. Okay, so manubrium, body, xiphoid process of the sternum. That's it. When it comes to the ribs, there are pictures in APR that have it set up to where you can identify ribs 1 through 12, ribs 2 through 12. Rib 1 is vastly different than anything. And I don't believe, I don't have it in my box of bones, okay? But rib 1 looks vastly different from a typical rib. And that's what you see right here. Okay? We have ribs 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, all directly attaching here to it. 8, 9, and 10 are your false ribs. Okay, they all attach into the cartilage of the last true rib. And then the last two we have are the floating ribs, and they're down there at T11 and T12. Okay. They also have much more specific names. They're called vertebral sternal ribs. They attach to the vertebra and the sternum directly. Vertebral chondral ribs attach to the vertebra and the cartilage. And then vertebral ribs, okay? True, false, and floating, respectively, okay? And you'll have to look at images in APR. I don't have a thoracic cage model here. It wouldn't fit in my car. I go back up here. We're just going to start at the top and work our way down here, guys. So I'm going to start with a cervical vertebra, a typical cervical vertebra. A typical cervical vertebra looks like this. Okay. This is the spinous process of it right here. I'm just going to hold it like that. But you can see at the end, it's bifid. That means toothed. Okay. All cervical vertebra, all the typical cervical vertebra will have that bifid spinous process. Okay. Here's a typical thoracic. I don't see that. Okay. It's not bifid, it's just a little shank of bone. Typical lumbar vertebra, okay? It doesn't have that either. It's just shaft of bone, a little shank shaft of bone, nothing big. Okay? So that bifid spinous process is going to tell you right away that you are looking at a cervical vertebra. All right, so let's say you don't remember that. Another thing that all cervical vertebrae have is that hole right there, This is a hole in this transverse process. Transverse process is a shank of bone that extends in the transverse plane, okay? So there's a hole, and that's the transverse foramen. The transverse foramen is only found in the cervical vertebra. The transverse foramen only found in the cervical vertebra. Okay. So if we sit here and we're looking at this thing, put down that pointer. Okay. I have the body of the cervical vertebra. I have, what's next? I'm just going to try to go in order here. although it's not intuitive for me, but I have the body of the cervical vertebra. Okay? If I take it and post it like that, we have an articular surface on the superior aspect, and we have one on the inferior aspect. Okay? So the one that I'm pointing on right there, the tip of my finger, that is the inferior articulating process of the cervical vertebra. Conversely, that's the superior articular process of the cervical vertebra. I have the pedicles of the cervical vertebra. Okay. And let me get this. The pedicle is very small within the cervical vertebra. Okay. It is that little spot right there. Okay. We have our body. Let's see if I can keep that. Okay, we have our body. And then right on either side, we have the bone that extends back from the body, and this is the pedicle. This part right here, okay, this part right here that I'm covering up is going to be my lamina. Let me get rid of that. Okay. So I have the vertebral body, the space immediately right next to it, the pedicle, this part right here that I'm rubbing with my fingers. Okay, that's the lamina. And then laminas fuse and form that thing right there, and that's the spinous process. And on the cervical vertebra, it's bifid, although you don't have to say, you just call it spinous process of the cervical vertebra. Okay? When someone has a laminectomy, this is what they're cutting away and removing, okay? To really pressure on their spinal cord. We have a transverse process, which is really small in the cervical vertebra. There it is, and remember it has the hole, the transverse foramen. The last little thing we have is a hole, booyah, and that's your, I'm sorry, vertebral. Yeah, vertebral foramen. Okay. The quality on this one's going to be fantastic, right? So there's your vertebral foramen. That's a typical cervical vertebra. You have two atypical cervical vertebrae, okay? And all of them have the same things. They all have transverse processes, transverse foramen, body, okay, pedicle, lamina. I mean, they have all that stuff, right? They have a superior articular process or facet. They have an inferior articular process and facet, all right? So all of these vertebrae have it. So as soon as you remember it on one, you basically have it for all of the bones within the vertebral column, cervical, thoracic, lumbar. Here is atlas, okay? Atlas articulates with the occipital bone that we saw earlier, right? So it's atypical. It doesn't have a body, all right? It has two articulating surfaces, a superior articular facet and an inferior articular facet. Has a transverse process, okay? Has a transverse process right there that I'm holding. And as you can see, it has a little hole within each transverse process, transverse foramen. Vertebral foramen of the atlas, really huge, okay? But all of the damn spinal cord is coming out right there, right at the base of the brain, so you would imagine this is always going to be biggest. Not much there with an atlas, to be honest, okay? Again, the same thing. It has a vertebral foramen. This is axis, okay? You can see it looks vastly different. It has a little shank of bone that pops up, all right? That articulates with C1, okay? That's what articulates with C1. See if I can do it, show you without getting my fingers in the way, okay? Right there. So it allows you to say no, okay? Because the atlas rotates around that thing right there. That thing right there is called the dens, okay? Here's the body of the atlas, okay? Body of the atlas is what I'm pinching right there. The dens pops up. That's the dens. Again, it has a pedicle. It has a lamina. It has a small little spinous process right there. Okay? C1 did not have a spinous process. If C1 had a spinous process, you couldn't extend back. Okay, you wouldn't be able to extend your head back. All right, transverse foramen, vertebral foramen that my finger's coming at you through. Okay, so it has all the things that all of the other cervical vertebrae do. Okay, the one big thing that's different though, guys, is that dens right there. Another name for the dens is the odontoid process. If you wanted to use that one, I would certainly let you. Yeah, I'm just identifying that. The next one we have is thoracic vertebra. How do you know you're looking at thoracic vertebra? The spinous process is imbricated. Okay, it's not bifid, it's imbricated. All right. If you compare that to the lumbar here, lumbar goes straight back. All right. This guy goes straight down. All right. Well, not straight down, but at a slight angle. Okay. But look at your range of motion. You don't have a lot of extension in the thoracic spine, do you? Just the thoracic spine? No. And I'm going back, just extension in the thoracic plane right there. That's it. Why? Because of the way these vertebrae stack over top of each other, like shingles on a roof. That's what imbricated means. All right? But this guy has all the same parts that we just saw. We have the body. We have the pedicle, which is a little bit more pronounced in this case. Let me get my little red thing. Okay? There's the pedicle right there. Okay? So the body, and then the pedicle. I've got it wrapped around it right there. Okay? You can see it's much more pronounced from the cervical spine. Okay? So vertebral body, shank of bone that comes up from it, that's the pedicle. Transverse processes. Continues around as the lamina. The lamina fuse, form the spinous process. Superior articular process or facet. Inferior articular process or facet. I'd give it one. Again, same thing for the lumbar. Here's a typical lumbar, okay? And I'm just giving you typicals, all right? I won't give you T1 and ask you to, give me all the spots because you honestly might think it's the last cervical vertebra, all right? But same thing here for the lumbar vertebra, okay? Body of the lumbar vertebra. Then we have the little pedicles, the lumbar vertebra. Transverse process, short and stubby. Lamina, the lumbar vertebra. Spinous process, short and stumpy in the lumbar vertebra. Okay. Vertebral foramen, not very big. Again, you would think this is a massive structure, right? You'd think the transverse process would be really big, and spinous process would be really big. The muscles are bigger down there, right? But look at the amount of motion. Motion is very precise here in the neck, okay? Motion in the lumbar spine is much more gross, okay? It's not as precise, all right? And that coincides with not having a whole lot of fancy pants stuff going on down there on that lumbar vertebra. The last thing we have is the sacrum and coccyx. Okay. And here's the sacrum. And down here, this little guy right here is the coccyx. On this one, it has a few things, but you're not really identifying anything. You're just saying coccyx bone. Okay. So there's coccyx. Everything else, all of that right there that you can see is the sacrum. Okay. We have superior articular process of sacrum. Yeah, I mean, guys, this is really super easy, right? You see all those holes right there? Sacral foramen. Okay. Sacral foramen, foramina, plural. Okay. Those are they're called the anterior sacral foramen in this book. You can call them sacral foramen, and that's fine with me. We have what's called the superior articular process of the sacrum, and that's just on the backside right there. All right, it's the only place you see those is right there. No inferior, just a superior articular process. This articulates with the inferior articulating process of L5. We have what's called, you see this little prominence, okay? If I put it right there, you see how it kind of juts out? It's prominent. This is called your sacral promontory. It's your first sacral segment. It's 5 fused segments. So this is S1, very big and prominent. And then we have what's called the sacral hiatus. And if there was a hole, it would be right there. Just like we have the vertebral foramen throughout the regions of the spine, of the spinal column, cervical, thoracic, and lumbar vertebra. We have a, a sacral canal or sacral hiatus right here, okay? That's the opening of the sacral canal, and at the bottom here is the sacral hiatus, okay? And I don't have sacral canal identified, so right there, okay? Right there. There should be a hole. This is a mold. I don't have the hole there, but there's a hole right there, and that's where some spinal nerves come out, and that is the sacral hiatus. Okay. So there is your vertebral column and thoracic cage as well. Please review these. Take a look. I'll be happy to go over anything individually with all of you. If you would like a little bit more kind of one-on-one guidance with all of these things. Okay. I really hope that helped, guys. All right. We'll see you later.